Okay, Bruchim Habayim. Welcome everyone to our Friday edition of our Shiurim. First, we're going to continue in our Seder Pesacheinu Megadim, connecting the beginning and the end of the Parsha. I want to take this opportunity for a public service announcement. First of all, the way you can get our Marmakaimis is by subscribing to our email. Now our email, you go to rabbidg.com and you hit the subscribe button. So let's say this week's email, you'll see that we're planning our second annual Yarchei Kala, Panama Yarchei Kala. And it says I'm going to be there, so that means I'm going to be there. And we have an amazing program planned. We're going to have a morning learning sessions about contemporary and very interesting subjects. Afternoon, there are going to be excursions, and you'll be able to see the landscape and topography of Panama and some of the main attractions. And in the evening, we'll have Shiurim together with the community. So if you've joined us in the past, or if you haven't yet, this is an amazing opportunity of learning and discovery. Okay, so the first shiur today, Pesacheinu Megadim. If you want more information on that, call, email mmhyarchei@gmail.com, or go to our site for all the information if you want information about this program. Pesacheinu Megadim, connecting the beginning and end of the Parsha. So the Parsha begins, Yaakov sent Malachim to Esav with a gift. What exactly was this gift that Yaakov gave to Esav? And it's interesting, Rav Moshe Shapiro, in an approach different than we said on Wednesday, says that if Yaakov Avinu gave Esav from his livestock, that means he gave something from the essence of the Jewish people, because the 600,000 herd that Yaakov had represented the 600,000 members of the Jewish people. And yet we know that this is a gift that ultimately will be returned to the Jewish people. And Rav Moshe Shapiro, in the Sefer Shuvi V'Nechza on Chanukah and Purim, also in his Shiurim on the Sabi Debei Atun, explains that based on a comment of Rav Moshe David Vali, this past year we had this chus to be at the kever of Rav Moshe David Vali, and in his Sefer Or Olam, he says something out of this world. He says that when Shem Ve'ever, when Yitzchak Avinu actually tells Esav, V'yesachicha tavoid, it doesn't just mean that Esav would serve his father, it doesn't just his brother. It doesn't just mean that Esav would serve Yaakov, but it means that Esav will worship a Jew. That Esav will worship a Jew. How would Rome worship a Jew? And the answer is through Christianity. Rome worships a Jew through Christianity, because their false god was a Jew. That was the prophecy of V'yasachicha tavoid. Furthermore, Moshe David Vali says that when the Yeshiva Shem Ve'ever told Rivka, V'rav ya'avoid tza'ir, the older brother, we interpret it, will serve the younger brother. But it could also mean will worship the younger brother. That is the prophecy of Christianity. Now, originally, the Roman Empire were idolaters. They were polytheistic. They were pagan. The Roman Empire started off pagan, but eventually they adopted Christianity as the official religion. And then it was Niskayim, V'esachicha tavoid. So the gift that is mentioned in the beginning of Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim, we discover what it really was in the last pasuk of the Parsha. Because the last pasuk of Parshas Vayishlach is, what is the last pasuk in the Parsha? The Parsha ends, Aluf Magdiel, Aluf Iram, Aluf Ela, Alufe Edom, L'moish Voisam, Be'eretz Achuzasam, Hu Esav Avi Edom. Rashi explains, Magdiel is Romi, that the gift that Yaakov sent to Esav was Christianity, and it was revealed to the world through the Roman Empire. Ultimately, when Mashiach comes, the Rambam says, and he is elevated, they will return back to the true knowledge of pure monotheism. And everything that their false god taught them was only to pave the way for the true Mashiach to rectify the world to serve Hashem b'yachad. So in other words, the gift of Christianity, says Rav Moshe David Valley, was to bring certain concepts to the world of monotheism, of Messiah, of world rectification, and then when Mashiach comes, they will be tweaked so that they will understand that there's only one true knowledge of Hashem, and that is the divine revelation to the Jewish people. Okay. So that's one connection, beginning of the Parsha to the end. The beginning of the Parsha, Yaakov sends the gift, and the last pasuk we discover what it is, and that is Magdiel. That is what the Roman Empire brought to the world. Next, we spoke on Wednesday about the one pasuk in Tanakh, Izim Masayim Usiyashim Esrem Rechelim Masayim Ve'elim Esrem. Now, it's interesting that the Arizal says that the 8 final mems that are consecutive in this pasuk are keneged the Shmoina Shratzim, the 8 forces of Tumah, and are keneged the 8 kings that ruled in Edom that are mentioned at the end of the Parsha, which surprisingly Arizal says are rooted in Kedusha. So what we have is a parallel between the beginning of the Parsha and the end of the Parsha. The beginning of the Parsha, we have the 8 final mems. The end of the Parsha, we have the 8 kings that ruled for Edom, Lefnei Melech Melech, B'Yisrael. So that's also a similarity between the beginning of the Parsha and the end of the Parsha. In the Sefer Koirei Meirosh, he also finds very compelling connection between the beginning and end of the Parsha. You know, the end of the Parsha speaks about the 8 kings, as we mentioned, that ruled over Edom before Klal Yisrael appointed a king. He says, amazingly, that these kings ruled over Edom before anyone ruled in Israel. You know what the Medrash Rabbah says on the opening pasuk of the Parsha? Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lifanav el Esav achiv. Lifanav. Meaning to the one who's going to take Malchus before Yaakov would. The word lefanav in the opening pasuk of Vayishlach. Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav. Yaakov sent angels to the one who would take Malchus before he would. Lefanav lezeh sheba shato ilita Malchus lefanav. Basically, because 2 powers cannot rule simultaneously. And that's mamish the end of the Parsha. The Parsha ends. That's why the beginning of the Parsha is Vayishlach malachim lefanav. Now this is an amazing observation. You know, the Parsha begins Vayishlach Yaakov malachim lefanav el Esav achiv arza seir sedei Edom. The Yaakov sends malachim to Esav. Who's Esav? Esav's his brother. Where does Esav live? In Seir. Where? In the field of Edom. Who is Esav? He's a nobody. Nothing is mentioned. Doesn't say anything about Esav. It doesn't say he's important. He's not important. It doesn't say anything. It just says he lived in Seir. He lived in Edom. Then when he's introduced at the end of the Parsha, Eila Todois Esav, who Edom? He's a red guy. And the Parsha ends, who Esav? Avi Edom. The thing is, you know, the Parsha begins, he's Edom. It ends, he's just a regular guy, Edom. But in the middle, he has promotions and demotions. He's like Bashan al-Assad. He is promoted to Aluf. He's then promoted to Melech. He's then demoted to Aluf. and then he's demoted to Esav. So it's interesting. The Parsha begins, who is he? He's just a regular guy in street clothing. Then he's promoted to Aluf. Then he's promoted to Melech. Then he's demoted to Aluf, and then he's demoted to a street guy. And the Rav Avram Saba, we were in the Avram Saba shul in Spain. He says, I thought about this. You know, in the beginning it says Esav hu Edom. Actually, it says that in the opening of the entire Parshas Vayishlach. But in the meantime, he's an Aluf, and then he's a Melech, and then he's an Aluf. And says the Tzar Hamar, I came out with a purified, incredible approach to this progression and ascension and descent. He says Esav ascended without any cause. He just suddenly reached a meteoric rise. He was just a regular guy, and then he became an Aluf, and then he had kings, and then he went down to Aluf, and then he just became Esav hu Edom. You know why he had such a descent? Because he had such a sudden ascent, he also had a sudden descent. And therefore the Navi says about Esav, and we're going to read it this week, Hine katoin nisatich bagoyim, bazoy atam oid. This all indicates Esav's downfall. Because says the Tzar Hamar, just like he ascended without cause, he descended. Just like he went up, b'mayla elyoina, he went down, b'mayla tachtoina. Like the Navi says, im tagbia kanesher, v'im ben koichavim simkinecha, misham oiridcha ne'um Hashem. Suddenly, he went up without cause, he descended. But not so the redemption of the Jewish people. We never had a meteoric ascent. It's always kav la kav, tsav la tsav. Like it says, mizois hanishkafa k'may shachar. The Geula of Yisrael is like a shachar. Suddenly it's that there's dawn, and then yafeh kalavana, and then bara kachama, and then ayuma kanedgalois. So, because Klal Yisrael was weak because of the tsaris and the galios, and we can't tolerate such sudden light, therefore we need it to be a gradual progression. Likewise, Chazal say in the pasuk, Migdal Yeshuas Malkai. First Magdil, and then Migdal. One day Hashem should give me siyata d'shmaya I want to write on a sefer on the Malchus Beis David. I want to call it Magdil Yeshuas Malkai. I have many reasons for that. But Chazal say, first Magdil, and then Migdal. It's a gedula that goes from one level to another. But Malchus Edom, just like it ascended suddenly, it also, as it rose, so it fell. Therefore Esav first was Esav, and then he's Aluf, and then he's Melech, and then he goes down, and then he's back to Esav. So the Parsha begins, Vayishlach Yaakov Melechem El Esav Achiv, Artza Seir. And it ends the same way. And in the meantime, he rises and he falls. Well, says the Tzar Hamar, I gave this drasha in Castilla, and many people praised it. And one Chacham from the Mekubalim said, I don't understand. What you said is in the Zayar. And I said, if you find it in the Zayar, I will make a festival for the rabbis. And I have never seen it in the Zayar, and I searched, it's not there. Meaning, this rabbi tried to burst my bubble by saying, yeah, I heard that before. By the way, I have that all the time. I say Chidushim, and people say, yeah, you said that before. So not only do they say they heard it before, they said, I said it before. The answer is because people don't actually listen. You know when people say that? When they don't actually listen. So they just hear Yaakov and Esav say, oh yeah, you said that before. Yeah, I did. If you're not listening, then it was repeated. But anyway, I was very happy to see this, because apparently what comes around goes around. The same phenomenon that rabbis have today, he had 500 years ago. People were accusing him of seeing it in the Zayar. Anyway, here's another interesting connection. 1, 2. Let me just make sure I have everything here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we did have 5 pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th piece is like this. You know, the Medrash Tanchuma says, Vayhili shar v'chamar, shar Mashiach ben Yosef, chamar Mashiach ben David. Rabbi Moshe Wolfson, somebody sent me an edition of Emunas Yitecha and Vayishlach, Tavshin Non Zayin. Shar v'chamar is Gematria, Moishiyim Behar Tzion. The end of the Parsha, the Zohar says, the whole Tikkun Habriya, until the Gemara Tikkun is alluded to in the 8 kings. By all the 7 kings it says Vayamois, Vayamois. Until the 8th king it doesn't say by Hadad, Vayamois. That's a remez to the Melech HaMashiach. And therefore, the Parsha begins as referencing Mashiach ben Yosef, Mashiach ben David, and the Parsha ends by referencing the 8th king of Edom, which represents the Melech HaMashiach according to the Zohar. Okay, so that is Pesacheinu Megadim, and that is offering number 1.